Hi, I'm Jackie Fox, and this is another episode of Pokemon Fight Club. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and we're going to be covering Pokemon Duel, because I love covering battle strategy, and Pokemon has always been a series that had really in-depth battle strategies. Now, unfortunately, until we get the gym rework that has been much talked about in Pokemon Go, Pokemon Duel has the more interesting battle strategy. So we're going to cover a couple of the tips and strategies that I use to win duels, and we're also going to learn from some of my mistakes. So one of the first things I'm going to show you is how I like to open games and how you should probably be opening games yourself. I'm also going to show you how I use the Pokemon Ranunculus, which I've lucked into getting 2 of, and some strategies on using legendary birds, which I managed to open 2 of in one 4-booster set. Also, by the way, if you're not buying 4-booster sets, you should probably start doing that. 4 individual boosters will not yield as good of things as a 4-booster set, so it's better to just save up your gems until you have 200. Luckily, unlike most freemium games, this game makes it easy for you to build up the 4 money item, which in this game is gems, and this also means that you have as good a chance as people who are actually paying money to get decent figures. So I haven't put any money into this game, for one, because gems are really expensive, and I don't really see the cost benefit working out in my favor anytime soon. So let's start with how I like to open duels.
It is useless to challenge me.
It's not gonna end like this.
And welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Duel Fight Club. One way that I really like to start duels is to use a 3-movement piece, and I always keep one on my team, to get at least 2 moves in if I'm going first. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with something on your entry point, and that is going to limit the number of options that you have available to you without wasting a turn further down the road. So even though 2 movement figures are probably the best in the game because they are somewhat mobile and they're also pretty powerful, 3 movement pieces are something you want to keep at least 1 of on your team. I personally really like Glaceon. Glaceon has proven its effectiveness to me in battle many times. It will stubbornly block people when they're trying to get past it, and on occasion it will even freeze them, which is one of the most awesome status effects in this game, because it means that you get to take a swing at them, and as long as you deal damage, period, you win. I like to combine a frozen Pokemon with Power Battle, which is pretty handy if you're going up against a Pokemon that has special abilities that are more beneficial to it than its normal attacks are. One good example of this is a Pokemon like Shuppet, which is really betting on the fact that it's not going to land its normal attack, which is Nightshade, and only deals 10 damage. As another point, and this is a little bit more technical, I like to start with a Pokemon that's capable of charging in on the left side for a couple of reasons. First of all, if I'm going for a surround capture later on in the game, the left side allows me to put a Pokemon in and requires that they set up a little bit more trouble having a 3-way surround kill as opposed to a 2-way surround kill, which is really easy to do on the right side if you don't have their entry point blocked. The second thing that I like to do when I'm setting up my introductory strategy, I like to block all 4 points. Generally, my second step is to do middle of the board zone control with Ranunculus. Now, usually I don't charge through the middle, but I find that forcing people to attack from the sides and giving my Reunculus the ability to start defending my entry points should one of their Pokemon try to block them off is very helpful. Now, this doesn't happen nearly as often, but if you get the opening and you can advance both Reunculus simultaneously through the middle, they make like a train to just tear through your opponent and get to their goal point quickly. Also, from the upper middle points, you have the ability to engage with anything that they bring in on their entry point. Now, a few quick tips on why Reunculus is just kind of broken in this game. First of all, as long as your second or third Reunculus is not in the PC, even if they're on your bench, you have the ability to re-roll once. So you basically have a built-in double chance with your Reunculi. I think that's the plural of Reunculus. That makes sense to me. Anyways, the other attacks that it has access to, one is Hyper Beam. I've actually gotten into some really weird situations where I use Hyper Beam on my opponent's turn when they attack my Reunculus, because Hyper Beam gives the next turn after it's used to the opponent, which is what's already going to happen if you're using your Reunculus offensively, but if you're using it defensively, it just means they get to try again, which usually doesn't even really work out in their benefit anyways. The other attack that it has is Brain Link, and Brain Link gets doubled in power by the number of Reunculus that are within 2 spaces of it, which is why Reunculus is great for advancing through the middle, because from the bottom 2 points or the upper 2 points, Reunculus is always going to be within 2 spaces of the other one. Now, if you have taken out someone on one side or the other, and you can only advance one of them, it gets a little hairy, but remember that Reunculus is still going to have access to Hyper Beam, which is a very powerful move. It's still going to be able to confuse pretty much anything that Confuse Ray hits because it's a 3-star purple move, and it's still going to be able to re-roll as long as your other Reunculus isn't currently fainted, even if it's, again, on your bench. Another strategy is to have your Reunculus hang back and defend your goal point. Again, within 2 spaces of each other, or kind of preferably right next to each other, so that there isn't an opportunity for a surround kill. This strategy also works really well, but it's probably my least favorite place on the board to have them. I'm not a super defensive player. I like to slowly advance my forces and surround my opponents until they really have no choices left. Because in a game like chess, you're trying to predict the outcomes of what the other player, the other opponent, is going to be doing with their turn, and the less options you give them, the easier it is to build your own strategy moving forward, because it becomes less guesswork and less statistical, and becomes more, well, this is the obvious choice, well, this is the only thing that they can do, and then you can plan for that a lot easier. So I know I've talked a lot about moving the Reunculus up through the center. That's just what I happen to do on my team. For other players, for people who don't have access to that, it's really just good to move anything that is a little bit slower moving and probably defensively pretty powerful. You have an easy job of getting even a slow piece back to your goal point. You have the opportunity to basically discourage them from moving in through the middle and force them to compete with you on the sides of the board. If you can limit their options and force them to the sides of the board, then, as I was saying earlier, there are less scenarios for you to have to comprehend, and it makes it a lot easier to control the game from there out. Now, the fourth move that you want to make is to cover that 4th avenue across the board, and that's going to be the right side. So usually I move from left to right when I'm putting my pieces in, generally because people will mirror you in whatever you do first. If they don't mirror you, they're actually setting themselves up for trouble, because you're using your first 4 moves to get 4 pieces onto the board, and if they move any of the pieces that they've gotten onto the board already, let's say you put something out on the far left, first turn, you put something out on the middle left, second turn, and they take the Pokemon that is defending their far left and move it over to their middle left. Well, now you have the opportunity to go into your third turn with 3 figures on the board to their 1, which puts you at an obvious advantage for the remainder of the game, or at least for a little while. So you really want to use your first 4 turns to get 4 pieces onto the board and not necessarily mess with them, just so you can get a good amount of pieces on the board for the early game to give you more options and to give them more options to think about countering. You want to keep the metagame as complex for the other player as possible and try not to be too transparent in your moves. For my right side attack, I like to go with the Legendary Bird. Legendary birds have the ability to soar over other pieces, fly over other pieces. You also have options like Genesect, Shuppet, not necessarily things like Haunter or Banette, even though they can do the same thing, but it helps keep the right side complicated for the other player. They have to be thinking about setting up ways to stop you. So one thing that I see people do is they will fan out from all 3 points surrounding their entry point, so that if I jump over their piece to get to their entry point and try to block them off, they'll automatically get surround kill. This is advantageous to me because, like I said earlier, I like to attack on the left. Right side is basically a distraction. It's the harder side to win from. So if I can get them to commit 3 pieces to the hard right side of their board, then I can tear through their left side. And once they start to realize that I'm just going to tear through their left side, they start to move some of those pieces over because they have to. And that's when they forget that I have something like Moltres or Articuno over there that can just jump in and quickly finish setting up the surround kill that I started on the left side. Another fixture that I have on my team that helps me outpace people in the long run is Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is really handy because of Sacred Light. This ability allows me to basically throw Ho-Oh in as a reckless charge once I have 2 Pokemon in my PC, because I mean, Ho-Oh is pretty powerful. Ho-Oh can tear through your opponent's defenses, but even if it doesn't, even if it fails, even if I make a risky move with it and it doesn't pay off and it faints, that just means that I have 2 more Pokemon that I can come at you with in the following turns. Basically, it refreshes my army, and that allows me to outnumber people throughout the game instead of just at the very beginning using the strategy of trying to get board presence early. With all of that being said, there are actually a lot of pieces that are viable in the metagame. There's a lot of other options. I really like any of the evolutions for trying to charge through and using them as my higher movement pieces. Most of the dragon types make really good defenders, or really good options for controlling the middle of the board, not to mention that they're just intimidating. And like I said earlier, there are a lot of other options that have abilities like Infiltrator that work just as well in some cases as the legendary birds. Now, I like the legendary birds because they can work double duty. Not only can they jump over other people's pieces, but they can just rip through them if they have to. I also really appreciate Ice Charge for Articuno. Freezing multiple people, or even just one at a strategic time, being able to kind of hold that marker and wait, is a tremendous benefit to my playstyle. One final note, and this isn't as much for the early game as it is just for making sure that you don't lose as you're setting up another strategy, or for, in a calculated way, not defending your goal point until the last second so that you can advance your forward strategy, is to include Goal Block in your deck. Goal block is a really good plate because it allows you to move one Pokemon that you have on the field to your goal point and defend. Probably my favorite defender all by itself is Ho-Oh, again. Just because I don't necessarily use it as much for offensive purposes unless I'm doing a suicide charge with it. And because it's just a good beefy defender. It doesn't really have any drawbacks. Sometimes Rainbow Wing can be a little bit hairy, can force you to use your next turn to move it back if it Rainbow Winged defensively and moved away from the goal point. But I've seen far worse moves for defensive Pokemon who are defending your goal point. So, it's really not that big of a drawback. It just kind of wastes your next turn when it does happen. But it also ensures that they won't take your goal point that turn. It also makes the game a little bit longer for them as well. With all that being said, I hope you guys learned something about how to open your duels, and I look forward to seeing some of you in combat. It's always cool to have good competition in Pokemon Duel, or really any game that is massively multiplayer in this way. So, remember folks, the first rule of Pokemon Fight Club is to like and subscribe for more videos. You can also donate to my Patreon page to help me be able to devote more time in my life to doing projects like this, which I really enjoy. I mean, even if it's just a couple bucks, I appreciate it. I have some pretty cool rewards up there for you. I will include a link in the description so you can check those out. And as always, keep training, trainers. Keep getting better every day, because if you keep trying, if you outlast everyone, if you never give up, you're gonna become a Pokemaster. Don't even worry about it. See you guys.